Hi everyone, I'm Courtney Poole and welcome back to the Vegan Playlist. In this video, I want to continue on the topic of a soul-based emotional shift to veganism, and I want to share about what it feels like to have that and what life is like as a vegan after you've had it. And so that's what this video will be about. In previous video, I talked about what the soul-based emotional shift into veganism is, so if you haven't seen that, that might be best to go back and watch. But in short, what I shared in that video was that basically the way that God has created it is that we have our soul, and in our soul, among many things, contains our fears, our passions, our longings, our desires, our emotions, our feelings, our moral beliefs, lots of stuff. And whatever those things are with relation to veganism and the topics related to veganism will dictate where kind of what our soul stance on veganism is and whether we're kind of there emotionally. And when we change those fears and those beliefs and all these feelings about it, we can get to a point where it kind of reaches a critical mass, I think, is probably how it works in our soul. And then it's just a fact in your soul. You're just vegan and you do it and it's from your soul and it feels right and it's just very solid. So what we want to do is achieve that, achieve this emotional connection, this shift in our soul from not being connected in that way to the truth and to what's loving and moral and ethical, to now, in my soul, I know the truth of what's moral, loving, and ethical, and I do it consistently, and it's a very solid thing. Now, this video isn't going to be how to do that, although I will have many future videos talking about the various aspects of how to actually achieve that shift. But in this video, I want to explain what it feels like to have that shift and what it feels like after having that shift. And the reason I want to make this video is because I think that it can give you maybe some guidelines as far as what we're going for, guidelines to know whether that's happened for you partly or not yet or all the way. And it's also to really illustrate the goal. My goal with all the videos that I'll be doing is really to do whatever I can to help other people get to the place where they can have a soul-based shift to veganism. So that's our goal. And so what I'll be explaining in this video is for anybody who has a soul-based shift in veganism, this is what it feels like to be vegan. And what's interesting is, I've had a shift like this, and everybody over the years that I've talked to who has had a similar shift, we all pretty much say the same thing. It's very consistent across the board, which is interesting, right? And so this isn't just me, it's really like me, but other people say similar things. But yeah, in this video, if you haven't had these shifts or you don't feel this way yet, this video is not meant to make you feel judged. Hopefully you can tell, but I'm not a judgmental vegan. I'm a very passionate vegan, but I'm not a judgmental vegan. So it's not meant to make you feel judged or not good enough. It's not meant for me to kind of be like, look at me, I'm a vegan superhero. It's just to explain for people who have had a soul-based shift what that feels like so that you can kind of know what you can look forward to as well. It's kind of about maybe giving you some inspiration of what it can be like for you. So, yeah, all right. What does it feel like to emotionally be a vegan, to have that soul-based shift? It feels like on the topic of veganism, the diet and the lifestyle, it feels solid. Like emotionally, it feels like I know the truth, I know what's right, I know what's loving, I know what's moral, I know what's ethical, and there's this sense of total solidarity with that. Like, it's like clarity, solidness. There's no sort of feeling of not being sure or a bit wishy-washy or confused. It feels quite clear. So that's one of the things that I think of. And I think also when you've had a soul-based shift to veganism, you have a connection to all components of the truth about it. So what I mean by that is you're connected to not only the truth about how it affects your physical body and the nutrition and why it's more self-loving towards yourself, but you're also connected to why it's more loving towards animals. You're connected to why it's more loving towards the environment. You're connected to why it's more loving towards other humans and like human rights issues. So you have a moral, ethical, love-based feeling about all aspects of it. And you also have a desire to know the truth about all aspects of that. So you want to know about the truth of how it affects animals. You want to know the truth about how it affects the environment. You want to know the human rights issues involved. There's not a feeling of not wanting to know the truth about it. And that doesn't mean that you might not, you might not enter veganism, like learning about veganism through one particular aspect of that. So for example, when I stumbled across a book about veganism, that impacted me a lot. At the time, I was looking for health info, nutrition info. You know, I wasn't so much looking for the environmental stuff or the, any of that other thing. But then when I was open emotionally to the truth about the other things, I had, all this emotion come up, and I had anger and I cried, and I just had a big emotional response and like phase with just recognizing the truth about it. And then I became connected to the other aspects. And other vegans that have had a soul-based shift, they tend to say that as well. Maybe they entered through one particular field of interest, but then if they were open emotionally, eventually they felt connected to all of it. So that is one quality of a soul-based shift as well. And it feels, another thing that it feels like is that we do it because we want to do it, not because we feel like we should do it or we have to do it. It feels like a joy. It feels like just desire, and, it doesn't feel like that it's just sort of a should, reluctant kind of thing. It also means that so here's another very interesting thing about it. When you have an emotional shift with veganism, it's about the bigger picture of ethics, love, morals, truth. And so what you recognize is that diet is not the only part of it. And actually, the traditional definition of veganism has never been just about diet. Because the reality is that in our lives, there's a lot of different ways that we can contribute towards animal suffering, for example, or where something about animal agriculture is then affecting the environment or human rights issues. And there's a lot of ways that is the case that are not dietary. And when you've had a soul-based shift to veganism, you want to know about all those other things as well, and you do your best to act in according to what you know. So in other words, like, it's not just about what we eat, it's about what we wear and what we buy. So an emotional vegan wouldn't buy, a new leather belt. You wouldn't buy a new car with leather seats. You wouldn't take actions and put your money towards things which then motivate, a company or a person to perpetuate that exploitation or killing of animals. So it's about clothing, furniture, cars, things like that. Also, for example, one of the things that I do is I look for whether products are tested on animals. A lot of companies, when it comes to, for example, things like hair products, makeup, body products, they test on animals, which often results in the death of the animals, or is certainly often quite a torturing thing for them. And so you want to know about all that, and you want to, as much as you can, buy products that don't contribute to that. I mean, the reality is we live in a world where it is not possible to have no negative impact on animals. It just isn't. But when you've had that emotional shift, there's a feeling that I'm going to do the best I can. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to any aspect of it. Whenever I have the choice, I'm going to make the choice, even if it's inconvenient. It extends to all these different things. It's also going to mean that if you have an emotional based shift about veganism, you're probably not going to want to go to a rodeo or a circus that exploits animals and uses them, different things like that. And so, it won't feel like, I'm just sort of doing the bare minimum when it comes to veganism that I kind of can to check the box. It's going to feel like it's a lifestyle. You want to keep hitting this plant. You want to, you want to do all of it as much as you can. Another aspect of it is that you'll have a feeling that no matter how inconvenient it is to be completely vegan, no matter how much ridicule you get from other people, rejection, no matter what the logistical or social or emotional challenges are with being all vegan in every way, it's going to feel like no matter how hard they are, you can't break it. You just can't. I'm not saying it might not be hard, like to deal with some of those things, particularly if it's like projection from other people or people attacking you or something. And I'm going to have videos where I talk all about that. But in the end, what it'll feel like is, even if what you go through emotionally feels pretty excruciating and really hard, there's this feeling like, yeah, but I know this is the right thing. I know this is ethical and moral, and I can't make exceptions. I just can't. And so it's like it wins out. That wins the battle in any moment. And let's see, also having the emotional shift to veganism, it feels like you want to take personal responsibility for your own nourishment, your own meal prep, your own logistical planning for what you need to do. Again, we'll have videos where I talk about how you can do that, but from an emotional perspective, which is what I'm trying to talk about in this video, you'll have a feeling that you want to do it. You want to do whatever you need to do to make it happen. You want to set yourself up for success because you want to be successful at it. You feel like, this is really important to me. This is the right thing. And so I'm going to do what I need to do to arrange that for myself in every situation. An interesting thing I wanted to talk about with regards to this whole, what does it feel like to have an emotionally based shift when it comes to veganism, is about anger at other people. So let's see how much I can explain this. I actually would really love to make a whole video about angry vegans, about like that type of thing. But the reason I thought to include this is I had a conversation with Mary Magdalene of Divine Truth, who teaches Divine Truth, and we were talking about this soul-based shift to veganism. We were talking about actually my business and things that I could share. And she was, we were talking a bit about this whole thing that can happen, or that some people choose to do, which is to be quite angry at other people or to attack other people who aren't vegan. And she was saying, which I hadn't really ever put it into these words, but I was like, yeah, that's totally, I agree. Is she was saying, when you have a soul-based shift to veganism, it's about love, right? Like having an emotional soul-based shift into veganism, it's about a step in growing in love in our souls. There's so much more that's involved in growing in love and improving our soul condition in love, but this is one of them. And so because a soul-based shift is going to be about love, you're going to grow in love, and what it will feel like is that you can't have self-righteous anger and rage at other people who aren't vegan or even who hurt animals. You might have anger. Like, so for example, when I first learned the truth about it, I did have some anger about how animals were treated and how unjust it was and how this affected so many people and these like massive human rights issues, and the fact that nobody told me this and I didn't know this truth, right? I had plenty of anger to go through. But what I'm talking about here is that when you have a soul-based shift to veganism, it is about growing in love, and you will not be able to feel like it's right to attack other people who aren't vegan or who hurt animals. Because then it's like, it's violent, you know, and I'm not talking about like physical attack, although some people do that. I'm talking about even emotionally attacking. You won't be able to have a feeling that that's self-righteous and that that's right and that that's justified. It almost feels like it defeats the point in a certain way, in the sense of like love and ethics and morals. Because growing in love is about being loving to all of God's creations, and that includes other humans, and it includes even people that challenge us as well. And that's how it's felt for me, you know, like I'm a very, well, sometimes it's called an ethical vegan, right? I have a very strong emotional feeling about it. I feel very clear about that. I never give in. You know, for me, it's black and white morally. There's no ifs and ands and buts. And I will say what I feel is the truth and the loving way to go to anybody. But if I were to then attack someone, it would just, yeah, it would be strange. It doesn't like compute to feel like that's a justified thing. Again, you might have to go through emotions where you do feel angry at people who hurt animals, and that can relate to a lot of emotions in our childhood and just different things that we have about the global evils and all of that. But I feel that it's important that we don't contribute more violence to the world through those kinds of projections. So yeah, wanted to talk about that. But yeah, and the other thing too is like people ask me sometimes, is it hard to be vegan? And the honest feeling that I have is no, it doesn't feel hard. When I first went vegan, I had a lot of opposition, which I'll share. I've shared in some videos already, different kinds of opposition, ridicule. I also, like initially, I first went vegetarian, and I never bought any animal products that involved meat or dairy or eggs or anything. I never bought any more. But it did take me a bit longer to have the kind of moral conviction to say, no matter how compulsive I am with food, I'm not going to go for, you know, this cookie that might have some, or that I know has some milk in it. Because that was kind of like the thing that lingered for me. I went vegetarian within weeks and never looked back. But it was about another year where I would still, because I was so addictive and compulsive with food, it wasn't that I wanted animal products or dairy or eggs. It was just that I was a baked good junkie pretty much. And so if there was something for free in front of me that I knew probably did have it, I wouldn't say no. And so that was a hard part kind of that I had to overcome. Although eventually I did get to the point where I was like, even that, I can't, I need to not do that as well. And then I haven't since then. But like really overall, the answer is no, it doesn't feel hard. And again, vegans who I've talked to have had that soul-based shift. If you ask them if it's hard, they'll say, no, it's really not. And, the one thing too, the other question I get is do you feel deprived? And that one I can say, I've never once felt deprived. Never. It's never felt like a deprivation to be vegan. And that's something that can happen when you do have that soul-based shift, is it doesn't feel like a deprivation. And, it feels like, to me, it just feels like awesome and fun and easy and powerful and all of that. And so, yeah. So anyway, with coming to the end of this video, I really grappled with like, do I put this video in the beginning of this series? I don't want people to feel like, they're being criticized or something. But I want you to see that, we're trying to go from A to B, and that's B. And I believe that B is possible for everyone. I believe that this kind of emotional-based shift, soul-based shift, is possible for everyone. You can have all of those feelings and sensations and experiences with being vegan that I just mentioned. Anybody can have that. And so, yeah, so in other videos, we're going to be able to really dive into, yeah, that's great, but how do I get there? So that's what we'll talk about, how to get there. You might hear that list that I just said and been like, oh, I don't feel a lot of those things, or I feel the exact opposite of a lot of those things, or maybe I feel some, but not others. And I don't want you to feel discouraged if that's the case, because those things can shift. Any of that stuff can shift. So, yes. Okay. As usual, you can find out more information on my website, courtneypool.com, and you can email me there with questions, clarifications, or if you're interested in coaching. If you'd like to learn a bit more about God's truth, about a soul-based shift in veganism, I will have videos linked below and after this where you can click on them, Divine Truth videos, that you can learn more about that as well. And I will see you in future videos. Okay, bye everyone.